Order. Daniel Kwasniewski to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Posey. I'm very grateful to be called on this debate on flooding on the River Severn. I have to say, I'm sure you are aware of just how badly Shrewsbury has been affected in the recent floods as a result of flooding on the River Severn. The part of Shrewsbury where I live, Coton Hill, was very badly affected with terrible damage and flooding in my neighbourhood. But over the last few days and weeks, I've spent quite a bit of time in another part of Shrewsbury, in Colham, also very badly affected by these floods. And I just wanted to refer to a couple of people who I'm very conscious of, and some of whom I've met. Lee and Sandra from the Hair Forum, Rachel from Glam Studio, and Gio Elson in his 50th year as a local butcher. These people, and seeing the devastation as to what has happened to their neighbourhoods and the financial damage that has been caused to their businesses, is actually absolutely galling to see. And yesterday I met with Peter Nutting, the leader of Shropshire Council, and he came to the House of Commons, and he actually informed me that over 300 businesses and residential properties had been affected in Shrewsbury alone. He estimates that the cost of clearing up from the ramifications of this flood, just in my constituency alone in Shrewsbury, will be over £1 million. And of course, the Bellwind scheme will help, but a large chunk of money will not come from the Bellwind scheme, and the council is having to find the money itself. As my honourable and right honourable friends from Shropshire will attest, our local council at the moment is grappling with massive spiralling costs of adult social care and is running a deficit as it is and struggling to make ends meet. These additional costs will be very problematic for Shropshire Council. The local residents stressed action is needed as problems with insurance and future floods will finish off many independent traders. I spoke to one B&B hotel owner who lost £30,000 during the course of these debates. Almost near tears, he was showing me the devastation to his hotel. And clearly, this is a typical business because the hotel will not suffer just during the floods, but will suffer for days and weeks afterwards. The media are very good at highlighting that Shrewsbury has flooded, very good at showing pictures of a flooded Shrewsbury, but not so good at subsequently informing citizens around the United Kingdom that these floods have alleviated. So whether you are a local pub or whether you are a local hotel or whatever it is, the books of these businesses is significantly down, not just during the course of the floods, but in the days and weeks afterwards. Seeing the devastation and listening to the heartbreaking stories hastens my resolve to get action for these hard-working entrepreneurs. And that's why last Wednesday I was here in the House of Commons rather than in my constituency with my electorate, because I wanted to challenge the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's questions, to share with him what was going on in Shrewsbury and to try to secure some sort of commitment from him. The Minister will know, if she checks Hansard, that the Prime Minister assured me on the floor of the House, in response to my question, he assured me that whatever work that DEFRA and the Environment Agency do together to alleviate the problem on River Severn, whatever solution they come up with, he will ensure that the government supports this solution. I'm going to hold the government to account on this issue, and I'm going to make sure that the Prime Minister fulfills his commitment that he made to me on the floor of the House. I'm obviously delighted that in the budget this afternoon, the new Chancellor of the Exchequer has announced a significant, a massive additional funding of taxpayers' money for dealing with flood alleviation schemes. With this in mind, we are going to ensure and I'm very pleased that other honourable friends and right honourable friends from constituencies along the River Severn are also here, we are going to ensure, I think, hopefully collectively, that we fight for our share of those additional resources to ensure that a holistic solution is found for the River Severn. I will in a second. I've just got a little bit to get through. I will, of course, give way to my honourable friend from Shrewsbury in a second. With this in mind, I asked the Secretary of State for DEFRA to visit Shrewsbury last week, and I'm very grateful that he took the time to visit my town. He met with flood victims, but he also came to the Shire Hall, the council building in Shrewsbury, to meet with local councillors, to meet with Peter Nutting, to meet with council officials, Mark Barrow and others who are here in the audience with us today. And he received a presentation on something which I hope to come on to address, which is the River Severn Partnership, which is a holistic collective approach of communities and organisations up and down the River Severn, working collectively together to come up with a credible solution to managing the river, which we then want government to support. I will at this juncture give very briefly to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend David Way and commend him for bringing forward this debate. And I've got absolutely no doubt, Mr Hosey, that he will be holding the government to account. There have been some very heart-wrenching stories that he's alluded to already, but does he agree with me that there have been some very positive stories and we should pay tribute to local authority workers, Shropshire Council, Telford and Wrekin, and of course the Environment Agency, and also the emergency services? All of them have done a huge service to the people of Shropshire.
I couldn't agree more, and of course I'm sure all of right honourable and honourable friends from Shropshire will join him in that. Before I give way again, let me just say a couple of additional things. The River Severn Partnership, this strategic coalition of 18 organisations, includes local authorities, local enterprise partnerships, water companies and the Environment Agency, and it has an agreed memorandum of understanding aimed at working collaboratively to develop a comprehensive long-term approach to management of the River Severn. So here we have an established group of all the relevant and appropriate bodies working together on an innovative and forward-looking holistic solution that could literally be game-changing approach to flood management. Yes, I give way.
My honourable friends, we congratulate to bringing forward this debate at a very timely moment, and very good to see fellow members from further down the river. Holistic means the catchment area. Would he agree that we should actually look at the whole catchment area? The River Vernew runs into the Severn in my patch, and this afternoon Melverley is flooded, protecting Shrewsbury. What we need to do is to look at holding water much further back in Wales, possibly paying landowners to hold water back, building new reservoirs, giving farmers the right to catch water, and as Mr Brian Edwards, head of the Melverley Internal Drainage Board, said, you want to slow it up at the top, hold more back, plant more trees, exactly as the government's proposing to do, but when it gets in the river, speed it on down. And we should remember that the river used to be navigable and took a lot more water. And we did have a meeting in Shrewsbury a few years ago looking at getting more out of the river, having more capacity, opening up the weirs and locks, and making more of it, but getting more water away. Once the water's in the river, you want to get it away, as those from further down know. So we need to look at a catchment area solution, going right back to the hills, taking the Vernew and the Severn right down.
Well, I agree with my right honourable friend, and this is the flavour of what we're trying to get across to the Minister today. Of course, individual flood schemes can help. We have one in Shrewsbury which protects Frankwell and the town council and the area there. But in reality, these small schemes, although protecting parts of Shrewsbury, are just pushing the problem further down the line. So, of course, then affecting my right honourable and honourable friends further down the river. We really now, and by the way, the River Severn, I believe, according to my notes, is the longest river in the whole of the United Kingdom, at 220 miles. I think that accolade certainly means that now we need the government to look at this river in its entirety and come up with a solution which manages the flow of the river across all of our constituencies. I give way, of course.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, and I share his congratulations for securing this debate today of all days, when the Chancellor has just announced a doubling of flood defence expenditure over the next 6 years to £5.2 billion. And he will have noticed that there's, in addition, there's £120 million provided to repair flood defences already in place, which may help honourable friends who've had flood defences damaged in Ironbridge and I think in Bewdley along the River Severn. But most importantly, there's a £200 million contribution to place-based resilience schemes for local communities, where I think the Severn Valley catchment has a very important part to play, and I understand that £23 million of that 200 is being allocated to the Severn Valley to look at this catchment-wide solution, so that those areas such as Bridge North in my constituency, where water was pushed through downstream from Shrewsbury and Ironbridge, burst its banks, and we need some flood defence to prevent that happening again.
Yes.
Interventions could be slightly snappier, I'd be grateful. Daniel Kozinski.
I always give a little extra to my friend and neighbour, fellow Salopian. I would ask that government also supports politically and economically the development of a River Severn strategy, similar to that already in place for the Humber Estuary and River Thames, but with a remit to look at water management, flood risk, sustainable growth and climate resilience. The River Severn Partnership, and this is the key point that I now want to get across to the Minister. I'd like this bit to be underlined with her officials, if I may. The River Severn Partnership are now at the point of requiring significant resources to commit to the detailed planning phases and studies required to progress to the design phase, and I look forward to working with the Minister on how this can be funded and delivered. And the reason that point is very important for me is I go back to what the Prime Minister's commitment to me on the floor of the House. The government will support whatever credible solution Shropshire Council with the Environment Agency and collectively through the River Severn Partnership come up with. My understanding is now they are at the point where they need those additional resources to conclude their studies so that they can come up with this holistic approach which all of us are so determined to secure for our constituencies. I give way to my friend.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful, and again, congratulate the Honourable Member for Shrewsbury for this debate. He talks about a holistic approach from the Environment Agency and various other partnerships down the River Severn. Has he considered that a coalition of members of Parliament should be in Parliament backing this, and would he consider leading that coalition of members of Parliament serving on the River Severn?
Well, that's an awfully generous offer. I would say, I think my honourable friend ought to go back to, I think, 10 or 11 years ago, I had a Westminster Hall debate on this very issue, in this very room. I think if he goes back to the records, 11 years ago, I started to talk about the need to look at the whole of the River Severn as a single unit. Because let's not forget, this isn't something that's just come upon us recently. Shrewsbury has been flooded in an appalling way many, many times before. And I have to say, I think the opportunity for the government is absolutely enormous. If they can protect our constituencies from this repeated flooding, think what sort of extra economic productivity they could achieve. Think about how property prices will go up. Think about how businesses will continue to operate and pay their VAT and their taxes. So, of course, I agree with him wholeheartedly that all the members of Parliament, through whom the River Severn flows, we have to work cross-party. We are, I think, predominantly Tories along the River Severn, which is a great thing. But whichever party you are from, if you represent a constituency through which the River Severn, of course I would like to take part in that campaign group. And I think if we can join forces together as members of Parliament and go in and see the Minister repeatedly and collectively keep raising this issue together, then I think something can be done. Before I let another intervention, I will finish. I'll let my friend intervene.
I'm very grateful. Does he share my hope that some of the additional flood defence funding announced today will not only be used for additional storage capacity in the Welsh Hills, as proposed by my right honourable friend for Oswestry, but also to ensure that there is a piping system, probably provided by Severn Trent Water, to get the excess water in the summer through the Severn into the Thames for the parts of South East England which have a shortage of water?
Yes, and of course my honourable friend raises the absolutely pivotal issue, which is the irony, of course, is that many parts of our country are very badly economically hit because of the lack of water. And I think in this day and age we ought to be able to devise a system whereby we can properly manage this water and ensure that its use can be better utilised for those areas lacking in this resource, whilst protecting our own constituencies. Yes, of course, I give way.
And in congratulating my honourable friend on this proposal and supporting it from Worcestershire, would he also accept that it's very important that we look at the tributaries of the River Severn, like the River Team that affected Tenbury Wells on this occasion, and of course the River Avon, which flows into the Severn?
Yes, I'm very much conscious of that. Very much hope the Minister will take that point on board when she's summing up and answering. I will end, because I want to give the Minister as much time as possible, but by saying this, I will repeat. The River Severn is 220 miles long, the longest river in the United Kingdom. The River Severn Basin is an area of almost 4,500 square miles, spanning the English-Welsh border, running across the West Midlands, before entering the sea at the Bristol Channel. There are around 117,000 households and over 10,000 businesses considered to be within flood zones from the River Severn and its tributaries. The economic impact of the devastation that our businesses have been through is absolutely massive. Just in my constituency alone of Shrewsbury, as I said, Mr. Hosey, over £1 million of damage and costs. I'm very grateful that I have had the chance of raising this issue. I think I'd like to also say that when I went to see the clear-up in my constituency, I don't think it's exaggerating to say that I saw very much of the Dunkirk spirit. It was absolutely extraordinary what I saw in my constituency. People of all ages coming together, giving up their time, helping their fellow residents, helping businesses. In fact, we had a buy local campaign over the weekend in Shrewsbury, where we were encouraging people to use those businesses that were adversely affected. The Minister will know how strongly we feel about this issue. The time has come now for the government to act on managing the River Severn.
Flooding on the River Severn. Minister Rebecca Pow.
Is there not a...
Not in a 30-minute debate. Oh. Yes, I do apologise.
Thank you so much, Mr Chairman. It's a pleasure, as ever, to serve under your leadership today. And I must begin, though, by congratulating the Honourable Member from Shrewsbury and Aitcham for bringing this debate. He has been so vociferous as ever about his constituency, but particularly determined and dogged over the flooding issue. So I cannot fault him for bringing this to the attention of government. And rightly so, I would be doing the same as a constituency MP. You certainly got your area and your issues absolutely on the map. I just very quickly do want to say, Mr Chairman, that I add my tributes, along with others, including the Honourable friend from the Wraken, actually, who's left, paying tribute to the Environment Agency, the emergency services, all of those local authorities, government officials, everybody, and including all our local communities and volunteers who've done such brilliant work during these floods, because it does really test people. Indeed, the Severn Area Rescue Association, I think, should be particularly commended. And it has been an unprecedented time. I think all members and honourable friends would agree. This has been the wettest February on record. It's been absolutely exceptional. And the River Severn catchment area has been affected hugely by Storm Dennis. And between the 16th and 18th of February, the river level, for example, at Kempsey near Worcester, where I went for a visit, having been first to Bewdley, reached its highest recorded level of 7.49 metres. That's just above the previous record, which was 7.47 metres. So we have had unparalleled times. And along the Severn, properties, it has to be said, have been protected by a whole range of permanent and temporary flood defences. And whilst it's dreadful for the homes and businesses that have been flooded, it has to be said at the outset that the defences put in place have protected some 50,000 homes along the river. I know in Gloucester they've been particularly affected. If he's very quick.
To the Minister, my incredible thanks to the staff of the Environment Agency, the County Council and others who put in protective measures after the dreadful floods of 2007, which effectively meant that this time not a single home in Gloucester flooded.
I must thank him for that intervention, because we must not forget that a great deal of work has been done on flood defences, learning lessons from previous events and storms, and the defences put in place have protected so many more homes and businesses. But that's not to say there isn't still a great deal to do. And of course, not all areas are suitable for permanent flood defences, and I think perhaps one of the most striking examples this winter has been the installation of temporary barriers, particularly in Ironbridge. Despite these barriers being pushed back by 2 metres, as up to 500 tonnes of water per second flowed through the town, they still did their job. And I'm pleased to say that the Severn is slowly receding. However, we mustn't be complacent, especially since there are continuing risks along the estuary, both today and tomorrow, and we will obviously be standing by to take the necessary steps. But in many areas, recovery is taking place, and also it has to be remembered that the government has taken very rapid action, chivied on obviously by our excellent members speaking up for their constituencies. But we did launch the Bellwyn scheme very quickly. I take the points about the Bellwyn scheme, but it has helped a lot of local authorities. And on the 18th of February, we launched the Flood Recovery Framework, which then triggered a whole series of other grant payments for eligible homes and businesses that have been affected, including the DEFRA Property Flood Resilience Scheme that provides those grants of £500, helping households and businesses become more resilient. And I saw how this had been very helpfully used in Bewdley, and whilst it doesn't help everyone, it definitely has helped a lot of homes, and I spoke to a lot of the people in those homes. Farming, of course, is also an integral part of life and the economy in our counties right up and down the River Severn. And DEFRA and the Environment Agency and the Rural Payments Agency are working together to determine the full impacts on farmland, and with the potential of making announcements about that Farm Recovery Fund later. Now, managing flood risks, and particularly local flood risks, requires risk management authorities to work together, and the Severn is a prime example of partnerships working at their best, as we've heard. In the Severn River District, River Basin District, the Environment Agency, the Natural Resources Wales, with 29 lead local flood authorities, 9 internal drainage boards, that's 6 in England and 3 in Wales, Highways England, the trunk road agencies in Wales and the water and sewage providers work together to manage flood risk. Because, of course, the River Severn, the longest river in the country, is a shared river. And in that, and many of its tributaries, it has to be said that the tributaries rise in Wales, a lot of them, before flowing through the marshes and then on towards the Bristol Channel. And there is a growing recognition that upstream solutions, such as natural flood management schemes in the upper reaches, can be an important tool in flood management, as was mentioned by the Honourable Member from North Shropshire or Shropshire North. I'm never quite sure which it is. But this was highlighted by the Secretary of State in particular, who visited the area recently following the flooding, invited by my honourable friend from Shrewsbury, and he's reiterated, as have I, the importance of nature-based solutions to better protect vulnerable communities up and down the Severn. And I also know that the Welsh Assembly government is working on implementing some of these ideas already, as we have been in some parts of England for some time, and we must continue to work together on this catchment approach. But these solutions can't provide the complete answer. It has to be an integrated range of measures. This brings me on to, of course, the River Severn partnership. And I absolutely share my honourable friend's ambition to deliver this long-term, comprehensive and holistic approach. It's got to be the right direction. And it's only recently been formed, this partnership, but I'm very glad to see it includes Natural Resources Wales. And it is taking the right approach, not just to having too much water in times of flood, but also handling those times we don't have enough water in times of drought, and providing businesses and opportunities, as have been outlined so clearly by my honourable friend. And I've got to say, those up and down the Severn have had the foresight to set up this partnership actually almost before the recent flooding, and that a memorandum of understanding has been signed and the local investment has already been committed. So it's a really forward-thinking project. And I'm aware that investigations are continuing on the feasibility. This is the other project of the storage of floodwater area around Shrewsbury, which I believe my honourable friend showed to the Secretary of State when he was up. I've just had a discussion with him before coming into this debate, and he particularly wanted me to say how impressed he was with what he was shown, and I think both of us would like to be kept informed about how it is going, because this holistic approach has to be a key. And I also hear my honourable friend's calls, my honourable friend from Wyre Forest, suggesting for an MPs consortium, and indeed including MPs along the tributaries, as was mentioned by my honourable friend from West Worcestershire. So we wait to hear more on that. And I would also like to say and to remind friends and members that significant investment has already been poured into this area, to the tune of 12.8 million in defences in Worcestershire, and other very significant schemes up and down the river. Further upstream in Shropshire, since 2010, the government has invested 3.5 million in flood defences. All of these defences better protecting more homes. But as has been mentioned, flooding is not a new phenomenon. And we've got climate change. We're going to have to expect more frequent extreme weather events. And that's why we are investing record amounts in flood defences to protect our communities along rivers like the Severn and the Wye. So I hope that all members and friends will welcome the announcement today by the Chancellor of this huge boost to flooding funding to the tune of £5.2 billion in the flood package for flood and coastal erosion management. So I think that underlines the government's commitment to this area. And within that, there was also a £200 million package over 6 years for a place-based resilience programme, which was mentioned from the honourable friend from Ludlow. And this will support more than 25 local areas, both urban, rural and coastal, from the north to the Midlands to the south, each taking innovative actions to improve flood resilience in these areas. I just wanted to wind up, Mr Chairman. The honourable friend didn't mention the issue of building on floodplains, but I know it's something that many people are talking about, and the Secretary of State and I are going to be speaking to the Secretary of State from MHCLD about the whole policy of building in flood areas, and perhaps giving renewed emphasis on how that should be looked at. I, too, personally, will be wanting to link the whole aspect of water consumption and supply with flood resilience, something that I think is very important, as was touched on by the Honourable Member from Gloucester and his large pipe programme that he is raising in every possible debate. So I hope that makes clear that we have so much commitment from government, and I want to thank the Honourable Member friend from Shrewsbury, because he is such a champion from his area, and I look forward to hearing more about the great plans for the River Severn. Thank you, Mr.